Ian O'Connor's my guest, and he also just came out with a fabulous book, which is always hot. I always want to get more information about two guys I really respect, Belichick and Tom Brady. And he wrote this book on Belichick, but I think he embellishes a little bit about that relationship amongst everything else. I have a lot of respect for Belichick as a coach, so any insights, if you're someone who loves business and loves coaching, managing people, you'll love the insight we got on Belichick of how he's been able to win this long. And obviously we know about Brady. A legend in this business, but let me say this, from ESPN.com, where he's regularly writing for, but has been in all the local newspapers and really cover like just about everything.
Yeah, I think you're the legend in this room, Brandon, but thank you for that.
Legend in my own mind, yeah.
No, beyond that. And no, I've done a lot of baseball, football, basketball. I used to be really considered a basketball guy back in my New York Daily News days, and a lot of golf, the majors, Tiger Woods. I was there for Tiger's first win at Augusta and all the way through this summer where he nearly won 2 majors and then, of course, won a minor. So,
is Tiger back?
He's never going to be the dominating force he was in his prime, but is he back where he can win a major? Yeah, I've always thought he was going to get to 15. He's at 14 now, and I think the win at the Tour Championship proved that he's ready to take that next step, which would be winning at Augusta or winning. He's got 3 courses next year out of the 4 with the majors, Bethpage, Augusta, and Pebble Beach, where he's won. So I would think he's going to pick one off. I don't think he'll get to Jack Nicklaus's 18, which is the record, but I think Tiger, if he wins 15 in his 40s, you could argue now that puts him ahead of Jack as the greatest player of all time, and I think he'll get there.
You never can count on tomorrow because there was a point in time with him where he's blowing Jack away. But you just never know when things maybe not going to go the way they have been going. You got to take advantage. Let me ask you before we get into the Yankee thing, because I got to ask you about your take on the Yankees. I know you have a good view, but why did you write this book? You could have written a book about a million things. You did the Jeter book, by the way, which is a really good read.
Thank you.
But why this book, Belichick? And by the way, congratulations on the bestseller list.
Thank you. Yeah, our first week we got to number 10 on the New York Times bestseller list, which it's hard because there's so many political and Trump books out there. It's hard to crack into that, particularly with the election coming up. And so we were...
In general, by the way, in life, it's Trump. It's stuff that interrupt.
That's right. Yeah. And if you write a Trump book, you've got a really good chance of getting on that list, whether it's ripping him apart or praising him, whatever. Yeah. So it was tough to get into that top 15, but we got there at number 10. And but I've always thought he was the most fascinating figure in American sports by far, and I think he is. And I wrote a column in 2000 sort of infamously predicting his demise in New England. I thought it was a bad hire. The 4 losing seasons out of 5 in Cleveland, the lack of a public personality that would suggest he had the charisma to do it. The New York Giants, not just George Young, but the Mara family, they didn't believe in him as a head coach. And so he fooled a lot of people, not just me. But so I had that fascination with him. Being so wrong about him in 2000 was part of it. But just, I thought even people around the country who didn't like him, who despised him, realized that there was an intrigue and mystery about him, and I wanted to explore that and humanize him if I could. It's not easy, Brandon, to humanize a figure who doesn't want to be humanized publicly, but that's why I interviewed 350 people to try to break through and find the total human being, and I think I did.
We see, and I purposely on Patriots games sat in the first row right behind the bench just to really see how it works. Not a lot of emotion, not a lot of communication. You don't know what's going on. You could be up 40 points, down 40, you wouldn't know. What did you find out? Give me a couple little nuggets to get me intrigued. And by the way, I got to read this book if you're a football fan, but give me a couple nuggets that gets me a little insight to hear what you found out.
Well, his friends and associates say away from the stadium, he's such a different person that most of America would have no idea and wouldn't believe or fathom that person really exists. He could be charming, engaging. He's very generous. I mean, going back to his days in Cleveland, he would pull assistants out of the hallway. Vince Lombardi's grandson worked for him in Cleveland. He'd pull them out of the hallway, give them $100, or here's a steakhouse certificate. And he would do that all the time with his assistants. He gave all of his radio deal money to his assistants in Cleveland. I think he did some of that in New England as well. But just things like if a friend had a family member, or even an assistant coach with an illness, cancer, he's very good and loyal to those people, and he gives them time to, away from work, even to address that concern. He was in the middle of a playoff game a couple years ago against Houston, and if you recall that game, it was a night game. They were in trouble at halftime, the Patriots. Their whole season was on the brink, and one of his assistant coaches, Brian Flores, who's from Brownsville, Mike Tyson's neighborhood, and now the de facto defensive coordinator, his wife was pregnant in the stands, and she thought she was going into labor, so the ambulance is racing her to the hospital, At halftime, she calls Brian on the phone and says, "It looks like I'm having the baby." And he says to Belichick, "Well, I've got this situation." And again, season on the brink, halftime of a playoff game, and Belichick says, go be with your wife. Now, her life wasn't in danger or anything like that, but I think a lot of people around the country would be surprised that he would be willing to lose a very important member of his staff in the middle of a crucial playoff game. Turns out she called back and said she stabilized and wasn't going to have the baby until the morning, but I think that's just a humanizing anecdote and story that I think would surprise a lot of football fans.
Talk to me about what you found out about. Is this Brady thing overplayed? Is it all media, or there's some truth to it?
No, there's truth to it. I mean, it definitely wasn't overplayed. Now, here's the thing, Brandon, and you've been around sports a long time like I have. It's almost remarkable that it took 18 years for them to have this problem in their relationship. It was a very transactional relationship all the way through for 18 years. But it's remarkable that they worked in close quarters under immense pressure every day for that long before they really had a problem.
What is the problem? That's what I'm trying to understand.
Yeah, the problem.
And why? Why now?
Well, at the start, there are three things. You start with Tom Brady being coached for 5 years by Lloyd Carr in a very unrelenting way, and then 18 years of that with Belichick. So that's 23 years in a row, and I think it just wore him out, for one. Alex Guerrero is Brady's business partner and fitness coach and life coach. Belichick cut access to the team in the middle of the season to Guerrero, took some of it away that he had given him. That angered Brady a lot. And the benching.
He needed him around. That was a security
blanket. It's his guy.
Yeah.
And he still has that guy. But Guerrero was also working, a source told me, he had like 2/3 of the roster going up the hill to TB12, which is right near the stadium. You just walk up a hill and it's right there. And Belichick just thought it was getting out of control. Like, these players are employed by me and the New England Patriots, and they're not going to my training and medical staff. They're going to Alex Guerrero. So he cut into that. And also the benching of Malcolm Butler in the Super Bowl really annoyed Brady, as it did the vast majority of players on that roster.
But most people don't talk about it. So the Butler thing really was, everybody was mum, but it was a problem.
Tom Brady gave Malcolm Butler his MVP truck at the Super Bowl a couple of years earlier against Seattle when he had the interception at the goal line a few years earlier. And Brady realizes that Butler meant a ton to his legacy. If they lose that game, which they probably should have if Pete Carroll gave the ball to Lynch, right? Their legacy is they've lost 3 Super Bowls in a row. They still haven't won since 2004. They haven't won since Spygate. They didn't win after Deflategate. And that win was so huge for them. I think it made Brady and Belichick the best ever at what they do. So Brady's always felt indebted to Butler, and then he's one of their best defensive players, and all of a sudden he's not playing in the Super Bowl after playing the entire season. So he was angry about it.
Was it, in your opinion, though, just from what you know and following the game and everything, did he have a good right to maybe bench Butler, or maybe just the wrong way he did it? What do you think?
Well, Butler admitted to ESPN and Mike Reese that, that was Danny Amendola. Danny Amendola told Mike Reese that the vast majority of players were upset about it, and they wanted an answer. Belichick never really gave an answer. Malcolm Butler told ESPN that he did have a bad week of practice. He was sick at the start of the week. He missed a team flight to Minneapolis, and that put him in a hole, and he never really got out of it. And here's the thing. As you know, Brandon, following football, Belichick has done a lot of unconventional things in big games, and usually they work. Well, this one didn't work. And where I hit him is you obviously have to give him room to coach, and he knows his team better than anyone. He saw something there in Butler he didn't like that week. And I think what he also saw was those 2 powerful running backs the Eagles had. His defense was terrible. Belichick, how he even got to the Super Bowl with that defense is beyond me. They couldn't deal with those 2 running backs. So he wanted to take the ball out of their hands and put it in Nick Foles' hands and say, beat us through the air. I don't think you can do it. At halftime, it's pretty clear that Nick Foles is ready to do that. And that's where I would criticize Belichick in the second half. The plan wasn't working. You should have gone back to Butler. Instead, he went to Batamosi, who had a big missed tackle on 3rd down on a scoring drive. So it was really, okay, didn't work in the first half. Why didn't you go to him in the second half? That's where the big mistake was made.
Overall, biggest surprise, in this book that what's going to shock me?
I think well, first of all, no one had ever explored to any degree his 4 years at Wesleyan University in Connecticut. I really found out a lot of very formative things and anecdotes about him at Wesleyan, talking to his fraternity brothers, his lacrosse teammates, his football teammates, his coaches. And I think, though, that the thing that surprised me the most was the gap between Belichick in the workplace and away from the workplace. It's so big. I didn't realize it was that big. And his friends really rave about him. And I think what you see at the podium is strategic. He created a one-dimensional character that he plays every day in those news conferences, and that is to set an organizational tone for his players that we're in the business of gathering information and not sharing it. Therefore, when you're asked a question, you give as little information as possible. And he wants his players to see that. He knows they watch those news conferences, and then to follow suit, which they do.
Moving Vince Lombardi aside, with all due respect, greatest coach of all time, and give me the 3 greatest coaches in your mind. Is Belichick the greatest coach of all time? I mean, you kind of get the feeling maybe he is, but then there's been some great ones.
Well, I think he is. I think he's 1. I put Lombardi 2 and Paul Brown 3. Paul Brown had a very lean stretch at the end of his career. He went 15 years without winning a single postseason game. Now, there weren't as many playoff rounds and teams in the playoffs back then, but 15 years is a long time not to win a postseason game. Although he's the founding father of everything in the modern NFL. I put Lombardi 2nd. I went to the high school in New Jersey where Lombardi coached, St. Cecilia's in Englewood, New Jersey. So it's hard for me to put anyone above Vince Lombardi.
Right.
Because I was on the last football team that won a state playoff game at that school before it folded in the 80s. And so the priests and nuns there would not be happy with that. But I think Lombardi, had he lived in Washington, wins a couple of titles with the Redskins, maybe we're having a different conversation, but unfortunately and tragically, he died young. And I think Belichick is number 1 because just doing it in the time and place in the NFL when he did it, the whole league is designed to prevent you from having a dynasty. The schedule, the draft, free agency, the salary cap, it drags you back to the middle. And since 2001, he has successfully raged against that. And with 5 championships, 15 division titles. Now, AFC East incompetence has helped him, but that's not his problem. That's the problem of the Jets, the Bills, and the Dolphins.
It's half your season.
Yeah, but his record against the AFC East is apparently somebody, I think it was Tom Curran of up in Boston who had the stat, is no better than it is against the rest of the league, which is a heck of a stat. But I think that when you put all that together, Belichick is 1 right ahead of Lombardi and Paul Brown. Changing
the subject for a minute, the morning after, what a debacle in a lot of ways. And I have more gratefulness than disappointment. I mean, I have a lot more appreciation because this team was interesting. Mm-hmm. It brought me to the ballpark. I know they're young. In my mind, I look at where they were 2 years ago and last year and this year. I mean, look, there's so many teams that would trade that out in a heartbeat, but a lot of people are just so bummed and disappointed, thought this team was going to go further. Is it fair are those fans just, how did they get on the wrong side of that mindset? That's what I'm trying to figure out. How did they get into such a deep, dark place? We lost to a team that won 108 games. I mean, it happens, but I can't get myself off the floor today.
Yeah, it's hard to accept the fact that the Yankees lost to a better team, but they did. And listen, I covered as a columnist in New York the dynasty with Jeter, Rivera, Torre, and then Girardi on the back end. And I think a lot of fans were spoiled by that. And so now here you have a very good team, 100-win team that falls to their despised rival, the Red Sox, who've really replaced them since 2004. That series in 2004 is still the most amazing thing I've ever covered. And I mean, as a singular event, I would say Duke, Kentucky in '92. I don't know if you recall that game, the Leitner shot, right? So that may have been the best singular event I've ever covered. But the most absurd thing and amazing thing was the 2004 ALCS. This series doesn't compare to that.
No.
But since that moment, the Red Sox have replaced the Yankees as the signature franchise in baseball and in the American League, certainly. And I thought Cora was better than Boone in this series.
I think Cora is a very, very good manager.
Yeah.
As I think now, looking at him, and I happen to sit right near the dugout to give the dugout a look. Mm-hmm. And then there's seats that you're literally in the dugout on the side there. And I realize, and I've been in those situations enough to know, guy was speaking about 5 languages and was in full communication with a lot of people, but in a really interesting, dynamic way. Reminded me a little Torrey Zimmer, the way that both had the left and right hand, the two of them, and had a lot, and that stuff matters.
Right.
And he seemed like he was on their page. Listen, I just think he's a today's manager.
Right.
He's not hands off. He's hands on, but he's got that team running the way. They're very confident in him. I don't know if they're fully confident in Boone yet.
Yeah. And I'll say this, 2 things. Boone's going to be good, I think. He had a good year. It's his first year. He wins 100 games, and it's hard to argue with that. He lost to a better team, but he managed games 3 and 4 as if it were June. And I think he'll learn from that. With the pitching decisions he made, to me, didn't make much sense. And I think he will become a better manager because of that. the Aaron Judge thing, which is really more of a talk radio topic of playing New York, New York, the Sinatra song, as he walked by the Red Sox clubhouse. I'll say this about that. Did it have any impact on the series? We don't know. The Red Sox played it after they won last night, right, in their clubhouse, in their celebration. But Belichick, who anytime any player or coach on the other side says something, he uses that with his team. Now, football, as you know, Brandon, is more of an emotion sport than baseball. And you can get a team in a lather and it works. In baseball, that might not work.
But especially Cora, he played that up to the hilt.
And the thing, I don't know if it had any impact, but if you're Aaron Judge, who seems like a really nice guy and an intelligent player, it doesn't help you. We're not sure it hurts you.
It hurt you. In all the interviews after the game, they were all like, let's play that song.
Right.
How's New York? I never see them getting all that now.
Chances are the Red Sox win the series anyway because they were the better team. But there's no question it didn't help you.
No.
So why do it? If there's a 1% chance that it's going to hurt your team, why would you do that? And maybe there's a greater than a 1% chance, but it didn't help, that's for sure. And I think it was a really foolish thing to do.
I go further than that. First of all, if you get a feeling for Cora and you realize why now maybe a guy like Beltran should be in the conversation because he's the same kind of incredible respect from the player, understands and communicates to the player incredibly well, and is as serious as a heartbeat. But I'll tell you, it goes further than that to me. I think one of the key ingredients the Yankees were missing was leadership, was somebody that was able to get in front of the locker and speak in volume in a dynamic, constructive way to send a message. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that Aaron is, I don't know if he has that in him. He's certainly not coming through at this point. Maybe the injury also took a little bit away. I think the other thing that was a little bit of a miss on everyone's hands, tell me what you think of this, is Sanchez. You ever have a groin injury? Like, you're a catcher. You're 3 months on the shelf, maybe more, because he's the kind of guy maybe had that problem, didn't want to say anything. Now he comes back. You got to get your legs right. So he's struggling. Everybody's like, what's wrong with him? He sucks. He had a groin injury. You can't do any cardio. You can't do any leg, anything. And I think that he's still one of the best players on the team. And that's what I learned when I saw it down the end. He's a very good player. And if you're crouching and your groin's bothering you, that's why you're going to maybe miss the ball and blah, blah, blah. I think he needs some work. But I think that's kind of like a typical scenario of play him a little less, figure out how to go get his legs underneath him quickly.
I think your point about leadership, too, is a very good one because there are a lot of good young players on that team. And also Stanton had not been performing when it mattered the most, and he just arrived. He hasn't been in New York for more than 15 minutes. It's hard for him to really assume a leadership position, and you have a new manager who's never done it before. So I think leadership
and coaches too. Like who are those? I mean, I don't knock on them, but it wasn't traditionally bigger name coaches on that team. Nevin, I mean, a couple guys that I think they're probably okay, but it was like Torrey was smart if he had a Zimmer.
Yeah, I'll say this though. Gardner's a really good leader, and I know he had worked and sort of took Aaron Judge under his wing. But then again, Aaron Judge did a silly thing, and he's your best player. I think there's no question about that. And I have belief in him in a tough situation, in a pressure situation, that he's going to deliver, and I don't have that belief in Stanton. But what he did just made no sense because, again, it's not helping your team, and it might hurt your team, and maybe it did.
Tell me the one thing the Yankees do this offseason that's a no-brainer, must-do.
Well, I think they're definitely going to get another big stick because that's what they always do. So if it's Manny Machado, or I think he's the guy that they're going to really target.
Where does he play, though?
Well, they'll have to figure that out. But when there's an offensive powerhouse out there who's a free agent, I think, and there's two of them, the Yankees are going to get one of them. It's just the way it is. And I think they'll figure that out. But obviously they need pitching. And so I suspect they'll get a big arm or two. And, listen, I think that you're not going to win every year. And I know it's been since 2009, which is a drought by Yankee standards. But by nobody else's standards, is that really a drought for the most part? And I think they'll learn a lot from this. I think Aaron Boone is going to be very good, and I think he'll be much better next year for having made the mistakes he made in games 3 and 4. They're going to add some talent, both in the pitching staff and probably in the lineup. And I think they'll be fine going forward. The Red Sox and Yankees are going to be there pretty much every year. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch and cover over the next 5 to 7 years. Judge will be 1 year smarter and better. Maybe Stanton gets more comfortable with his role. And you would think that Judge is really becoming a monstrous player.
But do you worry about Judge 280 being that big? And he's even gotten bigger. Like, can you withstand that being that kind of size in this kind of game?
I like the way he carries his weight. I think he's athletic, and that, maybe he could slim down a touch, but to me, that's not a concern. I think he still moves like an athlete. And when you stop moving like an athlete, like I always thought, we talked about Tiger Woods earlier, he bulked up towards the latter part of his prime because he wanted to look like an NFL strong safety. And I always thought it was part of his inspiration was people don't think golfers are athletes. Well, I'm going to show you that I am an athlete. And he got too big.
Yeah,
and I think that. Like he was a heavyweight who needed to go back to being a light heavy or a middleweight. I don't think that that's an issue with Judge.
What's next in sports? Now we're done with, well, in New York we're done with baseball, but what do you think is going to go on here?
Might be done with football.
I mean, I'm just
hopefully
thinking, have you ever seen a New York drought like this?
Yeah, there's been, over time, no. But you had the 2 Super Bowls with the Giants and the Yankees in 2009, and they haven't won since, and the Rangers haven't won since 94. The Knicks haven't won since 73.
But I'm talking last year, all the teams, disaster. Yeah. We're heading in the same direction. Will there be a surprise in New York? Are any of these teams going to break out?
It's possible that Sam Darnold will be good enough to win. Could they get to 9-7? Probably not, but maybe 8-8, which would be an achievement for the Jets with a new quarterback and a guy who looks that good. The Giants, obviously, they seem done, but if the NFC East is so weak that if they beat the Eagles and all of a sudden you're 2-4, but the first place in that division might be 2-3. So I think that if there's going to be a surprise, it's going to be the Jets in week 15 actually still having an outside chance for a second wild card or a wild card berth because Darnold is really developing. And I mean, he looks like he's the real thing. So
who do you like in the NFL right now? It's just crazy. Obviously, you have Kansas City really, really playing amazing. But is this season? It seems exciting more than the usual. It seems like a lot of teams. But typically, you can win any Sunday. Anything could happen.
I think the league's got to figure out the whole flag thing. The physicality and trying to legislate head hits and
Are you a fan?
Well, I've always been a fan of making the game safer, and so I'd rather overcorrect and deal with a year or 2 of officials trying to figure out how to officiate the game. And also let it be football still. But I've been very critical of the NFL and head trauma and not paying enough attention to it over the years. So it's hard for me now to say, hey, you're going too far. I'd rather go too far in the other.
Put the flags on the guys. I would just capture the flag. I would. But you
flag football?
Yeah, on the quarterback only.
Well, I think we should do flag football through. I think the NFL should get behind a movement in this country, Brandon, where you're not allowed to play tackle football until high school. Flag football, coast to coast through 8th grade. Now, people in Texas are going to be furious about that, but hey, too bad. And then your freshman year in high school, it should be about learning how to block and tackle the right way. And you don't play games. You scrimmage amongst each other, but you learn how to play the game of football. And then sophomore year in high school, going forward through college, all bets are off. Now you're playing football. But that's how I think you make the game safer, and you take a lot of head hits away from developing brains of young kids in junior high school who should not be going head-to-head. And I did that in 7th and 8th grade, and in retrospect, that was probably not a very intelligent thing to do. But I don't think you want head trauma when kids are in junior high school.
I agree with you. I mean, you have a young kid, you don't want your kid playing because you're afraid of all the things that can happen. I love I know people are so against this, but I put this out there, but I'm like, that's your $35 million guy. You can't afford some 100-pound lineman throwing him around like a toothpick.
Right.
I'm like, just put a flag on him, man. I mean,
the drop-off from your first-string quarterback in the NFL to the second string is the biggest drop-off in sports. There's only, if you look at it, 12 to 14 people on the planet who can play that position at a high level. A lot of starters in the NFL really aren't very good, but it's so hard to play that position. That's why you have, like I said, maybe 14 guys who can really do it.
So you really got, so they're in a tough bind because you got to keep that position safe, and everybody wants to get the guy killed.
Right. And we talked a little bit about Belichick, Tom Brady, and I think he's the greatest football player of all time, not just the greatest quarterback. But my father was a big Jim Brown guy. He would not agree with that. But Jim Brown started making movies when he was 30, and he left football. So longevity-wise, Brady has him.
We love Jim Brown, and The Dirty Dozen is my favorite movie of all time, just as a footnote.
But Brady,
I love that movie with Jim Brown.
Eli's one of your guys, right?
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
so Eli Manning, and even though he looks like he's aged pretty quickly here overnight, hopefully not, but Eli and Brady are two guys whose greatest talent over the years is they're available every Sunday. At that position, that's the number one talent to have.
Do you feel like Eli's really aged, though?
I do, and I'm an Eli guy.
He looks phenomenal to me, though. I mean, if I was getting tackled every other play, I'd be looking aged, too, though.
On the field, and I've been a big Eli supporter.
I think he's lost a little bit.
I do, and I hate to say it. My sister passed away. He showed up at the funeral. Her husband had worked for the Giants for a long time, but he was the only starting player of the Giants who showed up. And I'm certainly not complaining about that because the Giants, we had over 1,000 people at the wake, and the Giants organization was half of that group. So it was amazing, their turnout. But Eli was there because he understands what it means to be the starting quarterback of the New York Giants. And he felt like I needed to be at this. I'm sure he had 15 other things to do. So I'm a big Eli guy for a lot of reasons. But I have to say that honestly, looking at it, it doesn't look like the same player. I'm not saying they can't win with him, but I think it does seem the game seems more difficult to him now than it did even 2 years ago.
Unless you give him the Broncos offensive line like Peyton had, and you got the good running back, and then he has the good running backs. He's got the receivers.
Right.
If you gave him a little more offensive line, he could sit back there, run the ball a lot more, and a conservative offense.
I don't think you can pin it all on the offensive line because he's never been mobile, right? He's never been really athletic. But I thought when he was a little younger, he could move a little bit. And it seems to me now like he can't move. He can't escape at all. And I think as a starting quarterback, it can't always be about the offensive line. Sometimes you do have to have some mobility, and he seems to lack that now.
You're right. It's true. Your prediction on the Super Bowl, what two best teams you like? You got one?
Well, I think the Patriots will still find a way to win the AFC. I don't know if they're going to beat the Rams in the Super Bowl because I think the Rams will be there. I think it'd be interesting to see the Patriots against Mahomes and the Chiefs coming up Sunday night, right? That'll be fun. And then the Patriots,
that's gonna be amazing.
They have another Sunday night game in November against Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Just to see Brady and Rodgers on the same field will be a lot of fun. But
where's that game, by the way?
That's in Foxborough. Yeah, so that'll be Yeah, let's just hope both Brady and Rodgers are healthy and get to that game.
Well, if the referee is throwing enough flags. By the way, I got to go back to one thing last night. The umpiring. I haven't seen this much vocal complaints about this guy. CC basically not caring how much he gets fined. Right. Obviously, he's CC. Chill, baby. Chill, baby. Chill, baby. I mean, that was a lot of money he lost on the beating of the guy last week, and then I'm sure he's getting beaned with some more fines. But have you ever seen an umpire that bad? And both sides complaining, although the Red Sox had won, they walked away from it.
They didn't care. Right? Porcello actually said, hey, CC, throw the ball over the plate. He actually thought Hernandez did a decent job last night. And honestly...
But not the batters, though. A lot of batters complaining with the umpire, though. A lot of batters.
It was a killer set of circumstances when he had the brutal night the night before at first base, right? And all of a sudden now he's behind the plate. You just wish there was a system where maybe they could have said, well, all right, Angel, we need to slide you over to third base today because this isn't going to work out with you behind the plate after the night you had last night. But they have that rotation. I didn't think it was that bad by his standards, which isn't saying much. I didn't think he impacted the outcome of the game in the favor of Boston. I don't.
I do. I think in the third inning, we had no idea what the hell a strike was. Mm-hmm. We saw pitches that really looked really close, and then other pitches that were the same and not strikes.
You thought he did that more in the favor of the Red Sox than he did the Yankees?
I think he screwed both sides,
right.
But that screwing hurt the Yankees more than the Red Sox. Mm-hmm. I think that there was one point where you saw CC on the mound, frustrated, and it got to him. It bothered him. You could see that he was laboring over not knowing what a strike was.
Right.
And it caused him to throw some more pitches. I think it was more the second inning, but you could see the frustration, like, oh, man.
Right. CC talked to him after the first inning, too, right? And
so do I think it was did it favor the game more than the Yankees or Red Sox? No, but it affected the Yankees more. The Red Sox players, by the way, at the end, they were still up 4-0. So they just walked away.
Right.
If the score was tied, they would have been going crazy. We were down, so I mean they were up. So it was, but in the seventh, eighth inning, they were into a bunch of tension and argumentative. Wasn't a lot said, but the looks, the stares, no question.
Right.
And it's just not right to have a guy like that create that environment. Unless I'm playing, I can't really decide if that had an effect. Only the guys know. But from watching, I think CC would have pitched a little better with a different umpire, yes. And that would have affected the game.
Right.
And Gardner should have made that catch.
Yeah, right. His angle to the ball on that, and he's very good at it, but he took a bad angle. It was straight across instead of back And yeah, you're right. He should have made that catch.
Because I really I hate to put a blame on someone, but that, to me, that was the game there.
Yeah.
That's when that was a nervousness accelerator.
That was like and I think Aaron Boone has compared him to Deion Sanders, right? He said, that's my shutdown corner. But he looked like a safety on that play who took an angle to the ball that was too directly straight across instead of on an angle.
It was a blast, which was another problem.
Right.
Everything that reminded me of Savarino the night before. I mean, you just heard the bat.
Right.
Boom, boom, boom. And it reminded me of Kevin Brown back in, and that's where I started eating a lot of cookies. And God, I mean, I ate like 40,000 calories last night because I know what was going down. At the Kevin Brown game, where everything right from the first pitch was a crack off the bat, you knew it was not right. I was like, take this guy out. I was like, this is the second batter up. I'm telling you, it's not going to work out. The crack of that bat, I've heard it before with him. And that's what I heard with Savarino, which is why I wanted him to get yanked early.
Well, in that series you're talking about, that's 04.
Yeah.
And I had a Yankee, when I was researching my Derek Jeter book, tell me that on the flight back from Game 5 in Boston, we felt like on the plane we were down 3-2 instead of up 3-2.
That's correct.
They knew, I think, after Game 5, we're not winning the series. Or particularly, if we don't win Game 6, we certainly are not winning Game 7. They had that bad body language going, and, of course, it played out the way it did.
In today's game, the Yankees would play that differently. They would have gone by committee, and it would have had a big deal. They just pitched 4, 5, 6 guys, and not really gone with a Kevin Brown.
Mm-hmm.
But and you learn from that stuff. Like in playoff games, when you start hearing the crack of the bat, unfortunately, you don't have time to let that pitcher kind of work his way through. You got to come in ready.
Right.
So really, the knock on Savarino is like, was your warm up too short? Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. They say it wasn't, but he wasn't ready. Right. And that I blame the pitching coach for. Like, he obviously wasn't ready. He wasn't throwing his best stuff right out of the gate. Even though he got away with a decent first inning, to some degree, you could hear the crack of the bat. It drives me crazy. This was painful to me because I actually thought Friday night I was in Boston. I thought that they had that game won.
But I'm not sure the winner of that series either way, Brandon.
It's going to be Houston.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so.
Because those guys are buttoned up.
Yeah.
They play good defense. They got more pitching. They also can hit the ball.
See, 04 to me was a loss you take to your grave. I don't think last night and this series is a loss you take to your grave.
Yeah,
despite the mistakes that Aaron Boone made and maybe even Aaron Judge, I think that the better team won. And as you get away from it as a Yankee fan, as a Yankee player or coach, you realize they were better than us. They proved that over the course of 6 months, and they proved it in that series.
You know something? That's fair, and it's true. Pick up this book if you're a football fan. Early Christmas gift. New York Times bestseller. That's Ian O'Connor. Probably this is not the last of great books he's going to write. I pick up the Jeter book too. That was a pretty good book too, by the way.
That's it. Pretty good.
Belichick, prefer Amazon to pick it up?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, any bookstore. And again, we got on the bestseller list, so some people are buying it.
Congratulations. Also, another reason why I love this guy's son went to Syracuse sports management program, which is, that's the pedigree. If you're going to go to a great school,
that's right,
especially for sports, we love that. One of my favorites, and you know how I feel about Syracuse.